So to start with, Zoho Corporation is the name of the company, and it has 3 divisions. So the first division would be Web NMS, and the second one would be ManageEngine, and the third one would be Zoho. So the applications and the technology that we are going to discuss today will be pertaining to ManageEngine. So Zoho Corporation has close to or more than 2,500 employees, and the headquarters of this company is in Pleasanton, California. The development and the research center is based in India, in the southern part of India, in Chennai. So it has more than 70,000 customers spread across the globe. And we have 7 main centers all across the globe, 7 branches of Zoho Corporation all across the globe. And ManageEngine is known for its easy-to-use solutions when compared to the native tools. So that's the best part of ManageEngine. And you need not alter or you need not modify your IT infrastructure to deploy ManageEngine applications. So that is the best part of ManageEngine. So the adaptability of the applications is the key selling factor. So these are some of our league customers league here. So we are very proud to say that for every 3 out of 5 Fortune 500 companies are ManageEngine customers. So that's our customer base here. And ManageEngine offers solutions right from help desk management to enterprise IT management, complete enterprise IT management. So I'm going to introduce you to some of the applications that we have and its functionalities. It's just going to be an overview so that you'll be able to know what ManageEngine actually does. So this is the portfolio. So we have solutions for managing your network, servers and applications, desktop, service desk, and then Windows infrastructure. So this is the topic that we'll be discussing today. So Windows infrastructure management. So event log and compliance, and you have softwares for security as well. So that is more than 40 plus softwares, all falling under this one single umbrella called ManageEngine. Okay, talking about real-time IT vision, we have some applications like for network management, server and application management. Are you guys using any of these applications? I mean, for network management or ManageEngine products? Okay, that's nice. May I know the name of the application, sir? Okay, perfect. So we have other applications as well for network management. We have NetFlow Analyzer. We have Op Manager that is going to monitor all your devices. And it is just going to monitor the heartbeat of your devices, your routers, switches, all your networking devices, and all those stuff. So that is for real-time IT vision. This is basically for monitoring. And we have solutions for managing your network infrastructure too. So to monitor your rack servers and all of the servers. So we have network infrastructure management applications. And the category goes on. You have applications for physical, virtual, and cloud management. So most of the applications that we have are going to be cloud-based. So that is the best part. So we are focusing more on developing softwares that are not only user-friendly, at the same time they should be technically advanced. So that is the kind of applications that we love to build. And this is the software that the gentleman was talking about, so which is Service Desk Plus. So this is going to be a ticketing software which is widely used. And this application in particular has a very large customer base. And we would say that it is one of our strong contenders when it comes to the likings of the people. So this is Service Desk for you. And we have other applications as well for log analysis. When I say log analysis, we have applications that could monitor and track any kind of logs, any kind of Windows logs. So you have applications that could monitor your security logs and your application logs, your system logs, any type of logs, we have applications for that. So that is log analysis and security management. And this is our topic for discussion today. So Windows Server Management. So whenever I talk about Windows Server Management, I'll be discussing about Active Directory. So we have a suite of products completely manages your Active Directory. Not only manages, but also audits your Active Directory. So any kind of management action as well as change auditing will fall under this category of applications, which is Windows Server, Windows System Management. And we also have on-demand solutions and mobile device management as well. So the on-demand solutions, again, is applicable for Service Desk, which is a ticketing software, and also for other applications as well. And the mobile device management, which, as you know, will help you manage your mobile devices from a centralized location. So that is mobile device management. And we also have applications for social media as well. We have some intranet and internet applications for social media too. So we have something called Pulse for intranet, and we also have a lot of applications for the internet as well. So both for internal as well as for external users. So these are some of the awards and recognitions that ManageEngine has received. And this graph is self-explanatory, and it tells you that ManageEngine is going to be a really tough competitor when it comes to IT solutions. So we have a wide range of IT solutions. As I mentioned earlier, we have 40+ applications. And all those 40+ applications put together, they had a survey, and these are the results. So ManageEngine was the best seller and also a user-friendly application that could be deployed in any kind of IT environment. So the stats are here on the screen just because of that key factor, which is user-friendliness. Okay, so in short, ManageEngine focuses on building quality software. So we don't rely much on spending much on marketing. So we rely on spending on development so that we could build quality software. So we spend a lot on research and development rather than on marketing. We do market products, but this expenditure is more when it comes to research and development. And as you know, any product that spends on research and development should be built of a quality class, and that is ManageEngine for you. And as I mentioned earlier, deploying this application in your IT infrastructure does not require a revamp of your IT architecture. It is going to be very user-friendly, and the application can be easily deployed without any alterations. So the topic for today is going to be Active Directory. So we have our keynote speaker here, Derek Melber. He's a Microsoft Valuable Professional, and he'll be addressing you on topics like Active Directory management as well as change auditing. So post-lunch, that would be for the first part of the session, and post-lunch we would have training sessions for both the applications, or all the AD applications. And having said that, I hand over the mic to the key speaker here.
Well, thank you very much. I appreciate, again, all of you coming. I know it is difficult sometimes to get away from work. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But I truly appreciate you taking the time to do that. As Vivin said, I am an MVP from Microsoft. And I don't know if many of you are familiar with the MVP program. It sounds very, very nice, MVP, right? So with that, I get a little pen, one of those little rectangular pens. And then twice a year, Microsoft offers me the ability to spend my own money to fly to Redmond, Washington for a conference. So all in all, it's really not that great. But the benefit of being an MVP is I do have a direct line into the Microsoft product groups. I am currently an MVP in Active Directory. I have been primarily an MVP within group policy, which of course we all know is a subset of Active Directory. I started off in Active Directory, then for about 10 years I was in group policy, and now I'm back under the Active Directory umbrella. I've been an MVP for about 15 years. I also do quite a bit of evangelism, not only in presentations, but through books, articles, blogs. I've written about 15 books over the last 15 years. My latest book, and hopefully my last book, is this here, which is the Group Policy Resource Kit from Microsoft Press. This book is probably the largest endeavor. It's about 6 months of my life to write this book. So they're very taxing, but it's a way for me to communicate in another way the information that I have. I will point out one more excellent resource that you can go to that's absolutely free, which is the Active Directory blog out on the ManageEngine website. If you maneuver through the community over to something called Pit Stop, I write a weekly blog. And I don't know if any of you have read any of my other articles online, but my primary goal is to give admins like yourself small bits of information that you can use immediately. And I try to present the information in such a way that you can read or view the information and get all the details that you need to then go perform that action. So I try not to talk about theoretical things. I try to talk about things that you can actually do to make yourself more efficient, to make your networks more secure, to do things like this. So I feel the blog is really in tune with the majority of those things. And the blog is not all about ManageEngine and their products. I try to keep about a 50-50% to where it's just general information as well as information about how the ManageEngine products really help make things easier. Today we have 3 sessions. I have 3 sessions today. And the overall goal of the 3 sessions is to talk about Active Directory from a complete life cycle of Active Directory. We have to create users. We have to manage users. We have to monitor the changes that are occurring. And at some point, which we never want to do, we have to recover. So we're going to have to go in and somehow get something back that was deleted or modified in error. So that's really the goal of today, is to talk about the complete life cycle of how we deal with Active Directory. We're actually going to start off kind of in the middle talking about monitoring Active Directory and the changes that occur within Active Directory. So we're actually going to define what is change monitoring. And of course, it's my definition of what I consider change monitoring to be. Now, with change monitoring, we are going to first of all talk about the Microsoft way, because Microsoft has change monitoring. They have it built into the operating system. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about auditing and advanced auditing and what that provides you as an administrator for what comes along with Microsoft. Of course, when we set up auditing, the information goes into the event viewer, so we need to talk about the event viewer and how we can actually analyze the information that's being tracked so that we can find what we need in those logs, okay? Then we're going to move on and we're going to talk about how traditional monitoring and auditing really falls short of what our desire is, and we're going to talk about what our desired, our ideal situation is. And then we're going to move on and quickly talk about how AD Audit Plus solves all of these issues that Microsoft kind of poses and solving the ideal situation. So let's first of all talk about what my definition of change monitoring is. Change monitoring is the idea that we want to track every single change that occurs in Active Directory. Not just users, not just groups, any change that occurs to any object within Active Directory, down to a very detailed level, okay? Now, I deal a lot with security. I deal a lot with administrators and auditors. And one thing that I find to be very, I guess, unique is many Active Directory configurations are wrong, and the administrators don't know they're wrong. I just got 2 emails yesterday from auditors that I have trained sending me screen captures of information for companies that they're auditing. And they email me and they say, I went through your class and I thought I understood this, but what I'm getting from the company doesn't look correct. I just want to verify I'm looking at this correctly. They're looking at the correct information, but the settings are so far askew that the auditor was confused. For example, password policies. I find that many organizations' password policy for Active Directory users is incorrect. And administrators don't even know it. But if you know that today your password policy is correct, wouldn't it be nice to somehow get an alert if the password policy ever changes? That way you don't have to go run reports, you get an email telling you the password policy changed 2 seconds ago, you might want to go investigate that. That's what we're talking about with change monitoring. I want to get those details about what's happening in my Active Directory environment. Not only do I want an email, I want to know who made the change. I want to know when the change was made. I want to know what was actually modified, the old value and the new value. This is the level of detail that I need to get in order to track my Active Directory. Okay? Without this, you really don't know what's going on. Because unfortunately, most organizations have more than one domain administrator. They may have 5, they may have 10, they may have 100. You look at an organization like Boeing, a huge worldwide organization. They have hundreds of domain administrators. That means that any person at any one time can go into Active Directory and make a modification. No one else may know about that. So these are things that occur that we want to track. We want to make sure that we're monitoring this information. So how do we do this? Well, Microsoft has change monitoring. In order to set up change monitoring, we're going to set up what's called auditing. Auditing is configured in group policy. And what we want to do is we want to track our domain controllers and the things that occur on our domain controllers. So inside of a group policy object, we are going to set up the audit policy. Now, we need to set up the audit policy not on one DC, but on all DCs. All right? So for your domain, or per domain, all the domain controllers have to be configured properly. The good thing is group policy does this for us. Okay? Now, if I go into my environment here, this is my domain controller, and I go to Group Policy Management, you will see that Microsoft has given us a domain controller's organizational unit by default. And when we add a domain controller to the domain, it automatically, the computer object is added to this organizational unit. By default, we have a default domain controller's policy. My recommendation is to not modify this. Okay? Can you? Yes. Why do I recommend to not modify it? I don't trust Microsoft. Okay? I don't trust Microsoft that they're going to roll out a service pack or an update, and in that service pack or update, it is going to take the default domain controller policy and put it back to the default, wiping out my settings. They won't do it to my GPO, but they might do it to the default GPO. So I always create additional GPOs to configure settings at the domain level and the domain controller's level. Okay? Inside of this GPO that I create, which is right here, if we go under our policies, Windows settings, security settings, local policies, we have the audit policy. This is where we establish the audit policy. Any setting that I make in here, which is a GPO linked to the domain controller's OU, will automatically affect all domain controllers in the domain. So one group of settings is going to accomplish what I need to get accomplished. Now, with Active Directory, we cannot use a very simplistic approach with auditing because of the complexity of Active Directory. It would think that for directory service access, we could go in and enable that and we'd be done, but that's not the case. Because some settings configured through Active Directory affect more than the directory services, we also have to configure object access. Perfect example. When I create a group policy object consists of two different components. One is called the GPC, or the group policy container, and that is stored in Active Directory. The other is called the GPT, which is the group policy template, and that is stored in the sysvol in the file system on your domain controllers. So if I go over here to Active Directory users and computers, and under System, this node right here is the group policy container. If I go to the file system, and I go to Windows, sysvol, domain name, this is the GPT, the group policy template. Notice one is in Active Directory and the other is in the file system. So in order for me to track changes, such as the password policy that's configured in group policy, I must have both of these areas being tracked. I must track this information. Now, when we go back to the policies, the audit policy, you will notice that I have options. I can do success or failure, all right? This is important because we want to know when someone successfully creates a user. But we also want to know when someone tries to modify or change the administrator password. That's going to be a failure, hopefully, right? As long as our security is set up properly. If some normal employee tries to modify the administrator password, I want that tracked. If someone fails to log on, I want that tracked. So we want to set up both success and failure to ensure that we're capturing all of the events that are occurring. Yes, we want to know the success, but we want to look at trends. We want to know when someone is negatively trying to access our environment. So we have both of those settings that we need to set up inside of our policy. So in a GPO, linked to the domain controllers OU, we go to the audit policy settings and we establish the configurations to make sure that we're tracking the right information, okay? Now, at this point, not much is going to happen. This is the tricky part. What I find is that administrators want this. All administrators want to know when things are occurring to Active Directory. Because it's so large, it's almost impossible to know what is going on in Active Directory. So I find that many administrators go into auditing, they set up auditing, they go to the event log, and there's nothing there. Well, that's where you need to understand the details, and here's the secret. These two settings, directory service access and object access, two-step process. We've done step one. We've gone into group policy, and we've configured the audit policy. Now we have to do step two. Step two is to go to the areas, one is in Active Directory and one is in the file system, and we have to tell those areas exactly what we want tracked. This is also called auditing, right? So right here is auditing. Now, back in 2000, Microsoft came up with these terms. One's called an SACL and one's called a DACL. Over here, under the Permissions tab, this is called the Discretionary Access Control List, or the DACL. The DACL is what we've known to set up for years. We did this in Windows NT. We had all of these settings to control access. We also have the SACL, the Security Access Control List. The Security Access Control List is a direct tie from the object to Event Viewer. So when I go in here and I establish some auditing for some object or some property, it is going to take any event that occurs to that object and track it in the Event Viewer. So if I go back in my environment and I go to Active Directory users and computers, I go to the domain node, I go to the security tab, advanced, auditing, I have created this list. I had to tell Active Directory what I wanted to track. As soon as you do this, anything that you do inside of Active Directory is going to be tracked in the event viewer. Okay? I also have to do this to that policies folder under the sysvol in my file system. What exactly do I want to track here? Well, I want to track group, organizational unit, user, contacts. So I am tracking all the different types of objects that I want to see show up in the event viewer so that if anything changes, now I have a log of all of those changes that are occurring in Active Directory. Now, I will give you a little tip here. When I right-clicked on the domain and I went to Properties, I, by default, have a security tab in my environment. You may not have that security tab in your environment, okay? By default, even today, when you install Active Directory and you go into Active Directory users and computers, this is going to be what you have by default. Okay? If you see this, it's not a problem. You just need to know how to get that security tab to show up on the properties. Now, I often like to kind of poke fun at Microsoft because it's easy to do. And this is one area it's easy, right? Microsoft, by default, doesn't allow you to see security, right? The security tab. And in order for you to get the security tab, you have to set up advanced features. So according to Microsoft, they think security is an advanced feature, okay, which is possibly why we're getting so many attacks in the Windows world over the last couple of years successfully, because Microsoft never considered security to be a #1 priority. Okay? This setting has not changed name in 15 years. It's been the same since Windows 2000, the exact same. All right? So back then, they thought it was advanced. I don't think they really think it's advanced today, but that's the setting that you have to set up. Once I select advanced features, now I have that security tab that shows up. That way you can get that security tab to show up in your environment, right? So at this point, what we have is we have our group policy object linked to the domain controller's OU. Inside of there, we have the audit policy. We've set up directory service access and object access for success and failure. We've then gone over to the domain node, and we told the domain node in Active Directory users and computers that we want to track all of these types of objects for anyone that tries to access that. We've also gone into the policies folder under sysvol and done that exact thing. At this point, we now have our domain controllers tracking what's occurring in any Active Directory change. Okay? Now, I will throw in one little small caveat as well. When we went over to the policies folder, we had to do that on every DC because that information is not replicated between DC. The contents is, but not the permissions. So you will have to set up the SACL on all DCs manually. Okay? In Active Directory, you don't have to do that. Active Directory, that information is actually replicated, so we don't have to do that multiple times. It seems like a lot of work. It's going to take you less than 10 minutes. We actually have a guide to tell you exactly what to configure, how to configure it, less than 10 minutes. If you've never done it before, it's less than 10 minutes. If you've gone into the SACL and the DACL, it's going to take you just over 5 minutes. It's very, very quick to get this set up. Okay? Now that we have things being tracked, the information is going to go to the event viewer. So now our event viewer is collecting all of the events related to the activity for Active Directory and the policies subfolder. Okay? They're going to be stored in the security log. And then here becomes the start of the negatives on the DC where the event occurred. How many DCs do you have? Let's do a little contest. Pick one domain. You can't pick them all. For one domain, who has more than 25 DCs in that domain? Anyone have more than 25 per domain? Anyone got 20? 20-ish? 23, okay? 23 DCs per domain. That means in his environment, any one change could be tracked on one of 23 domain controllers, all right? So in his environment, I'm going to use the number 20 because it's easier than math with 23. I'm going to have 20 event logs. 20 security logs, all right? So I'm going to have 20 security logs that I'm going to have to go into to try to find these events. So that doesn't, it's not awful. It's only 20. But then again, it's not one. It is 20, okay? Each DC has its own security log. This is not replicated between DCs. Okay? Sysvol is replicated. Active Directory database is replicated. Security log, not replicated. All right? So in order to view all of the events, I have to look at 20 logs. All right? So these are all the things that we have set up to track, which is what we want. We want all these areas to be tracking. Now, at this point, we have everything set up correctly, and we're logging, and everything's going into Event Viewer. But we do have one additional option to set up. It's called Advanced Auditing. Advanced Auditing is a technology that Microsoft released about 5 years ago. And it's only for certain operating systems. Advanced auditing started in Vista and Server 2008, but really was finalized in Windows 7 and Server 2008 R2. Advanced auditing is almost identical to auditing, but it actually has more depth. So back here in Group Policy, under my security settings audit policy were these audit settings. Down here, I have advanced audit policy. And my advanced audit policy looks similar, right? Same settings, but now I have granular controls. They're called subcategories. So when I actually want to let's see, account management. Account management means user, group, and computer, right? From the normal auditing. Here, I can specify just users and I don't worry about anything else. Maybe if you're looking at servers. So what Microsoft did is they took the normal auditing and they broke it up into subcategories, allowing you to be more efficient in what you are tracking. That way your logs don't get as large as they would with normal auditing. In addition to that, they added additional event IDs related to advanced auditing. So in the end, we want to use advanced auditing. This is what we want to configure. But of course, with every new technology, not everything is going to work out exactly like we thought. If I come in and I set up any of these settings, by default, none of them will take effect. But Microsoft had to make a decision. If you have auditing set up, and then you're in here just evaluating and you set up advanced auditing, would you want the advanced auditing to all of a sudden kick in? Or do you want to make sure that what you've been doing for the last 10 years still works? Okay? So what Microsoft did is they decided to have advanced auditing not take over from auditing until you tell it, I want this to take over, okay? In order to do that, you have to set up group policy. Now, here are some details about advanced auditing. That's where it's located. These are the different areas. Those are the AD changes. This is where you locate them in different operating systems, depending on how you're accessing it. And this is how you make sure that advanced auditing takes control over the legacy auditing. It's a group policy setting. This is where that group policy setting is located. And it's called Force Audit Policy Subcategory Settings to override audit policy category settings. Okay? Now, nowhere else do they describe this subcategory except for in the policy setting, which is extremely confusing. So in order for you to have advanced auditing take control, you want to enable the policy. Now, I'm certain that most of you have had to go into group policy, and this whole configured, not configured is a little confusing. It's the same idea here, right? Enabled, disabled. You have to look at the double negatives. So you want to enable this setting in order for advanced auditing to occur, right? If you have a mixture of Server 2003 and Server 2008 R2 domain controllers, your 2008 R2 domain controllers can do advanced auditing, and your Server 2003 will have to do the legacy auditing. But I can have a mixture, okay? I can have a mixture in the environment. I would just have to set up different policies in order for that to occur. But now what we have is we have the newer generation auditing, tracking events and having them go into the event viewer for us. So now let's talk a little bit about the event viewer, because this is the tool that Microsoft gives us to analyze all of the changes that have occurred in Active Directory that we're tracking, okay? First of all, you're going to notice that older versions of the operating system have a 3-digit event ID. The newer have 4. Because they added so many additional event IDs, they had to go to a 4-digit system to incorporate the number of events that can be generated, or the different types of events that can be generated. If ever you look at an event and you're not certain what it does, one good resource is this eventid.net. You can actually type in the event ID, you can search on certain names, and it will help you understand what the event is supposed to do. Most of the time, they also do a 3 to 4 digit conversion for you. That way, all the information is there. One of the things that I try to instruct to administrators is you want to create views. You want to create custom reports that are helpful to you. And I don't know exactly what that is to you. Different companies have different rules and regulations and different desires. If you have certain activities that you want to track and have them show up together on certain reports, you can actually do that. The best way to find out the activity, such as the deletion of a user or the deletion of a group, and to find out what event ID that is to go here. These knowledge base articles are very detailed in the event ID and what actually that event ID is tracking in your environment. This is also going to be useful, actually mandatory, for us to go into the event viewer to set up filters. We have to know the event IDs, okay? Microsoft doesn't tell us what those event IDs are, and you really don't want to have to research them based on trial and error. What you want to do is you want to go to the source and find out what event ID is associated with what task that is occurring in Active Directory. That is going to help you go a long way. So this is kind of a resource page for you on where to go get information. Now, another thing that Microsoft did in the event viewer is they created something called a custom view. Now, custom views are brand new, starting with Windows Server 2008. There was a dramatic change from the event viewer in Windows Server 2003 to that of Server 2008. Microsoft actually hired a team. They had a code name for the new event viewer called Crimson, and they went in and did some amazing changes for event viewer in the log structure and the capabilities that you have inside of the event viewer. So let's take a look at the new event viewer and some benefits. So let's first of all look at the normal security log. So I'm in the event viewer here, and this is my security log. Kind of looks like the old event viewer, but there are some things that are dramatically different. Okay? Now, this one security log on one domain controller contains approximately 188,000 events. Okay, I'm going to round that up to 200,000 for ease of math. This gentleman here has 20 domain controllers. If each domain controller has a current security log full of 200,000 events, how many events right now, real time, does this gentleman have to worry about at any one time? 20 times 200,000. I think it's 4 million, okay? So I have a simple task for him. It's a simple question, extremely simple, and I'm certain that all of you want to know this as well in your environment. I just need him to go through the security logs and tell me the last time that the domain admins group changed membership. How many of you want to know that? To know the last time your domain admins group changed membership, right? It's a very reasonable request. How long do you think it would take him to do that? 4 million entries. Okay? Now, of course, there's some way to search, right? Has to be. Well, let me show you Microsoft's view of how to try to filter through this information. The first thing that they have is something called a custom view. Okay? A custom view allows you to only take certain event IDs and put them in a single list. Now, right off the top of my head, I do not know the event ID for group membership changes. I don't, okay? But you can go to one of those knowledge base articles, and you can look it up, and you can create a custom view that allows you to view group membership changes. That sounds easy enough, okay? Now, this one here is related to logons, and I took 200,000 events, and I got it down to 40,000 events. All right? So let's say that my 200,000 events gets down to 50,000 events for group changes. That's pretty good, right? I've knocked 200,000 down by a quarter. So instead of 4 million events, I have 1 million events across 20 domain controllers that I'm going to have to filter. Okay? So I'm getting there, but slowly am I getting there. Okay? Now, if these are tasks which you don't want to do, but you would like to hire someone to do and pay on an hourly basis, I am available. Okay? Because this is going to take a long time. These types of manual evaluations take a long time, and here's why. If this were a list of group modifications, notice nowhere in this view does it say the group that was changed. So that means that you would have to go to the details of every single event. You'd have to scroll down because the bottom normally contains the information, and you'd have to go one by one looking for the domain admins group. You'd have to do this 1 million times for the real-time view. Okay? Now, we do have an option. Right here, which is our filter. Now, what a filter allows you to do is specify security. I can put in my event IDs. I have a keyword. I can put in a keyword. Well, that's pretty convenient, right? If I put in a keyword such as admin, then I'm going to get a listing of all the groups that have been modified that have the word admins in it. Well, that could really go a long way. So I'm going to come in here. It doesn't allow me to type in the box. This is a pre-configured drop-down that Microsoft said, and notice none of my entries have domain admins or admins. So I'm still stuck with my 1 million events, and of those 1 million events, I'm going to have to manually go through each and every one of them in order to see what I want to see, okay? So the custom views are nice, and they allow you to get down to a certain level, but they don't get us to where we want to be, okay? But we're only talking about current, right? The current security log. How big can that security log get before it has to overwrite? Because I'm assuming most of you have the log to, once it gets filled up, to start to overwrite events as needed, right? Well, let's first of all go and talk about the size of the logs. Now, I'm going to come in here to group policy. And there is actually a group policy setting, maximum security log size. Now, many of us have, gone through and we have put in numbers until it hits the max, and we know what the max is, but there's no reason to do that because Microsoft has provided explanations with us, okay? Now, I did not modify this. These are not my words, these are Microsoft words, okay? And I know it's hard to read, so I'll read it to you. The security setting specifies as the maximum size of the security event log, which has a theoretical maximum of 4 gig. Okay, I think the key word here is theoretical. Then it continues, and it gives you Microsoft's best practice for the size of your security log. Practically, it's a lower limit, 300 meg. Mine is set to 4 gig, and I'm getting 200,000 events. If yours is set to 300 meg, which is approximately 1/10, that means you're going to get approximately 20,000 events per log before you have to archive the log. And when I archive the log, that means I have a separate file that is not visible in the event viewer that I have to deal with, okay? Now, I've done a little bit of research on this in terms of these numbers. And again, I have a lot of MVP friends, and I actually emailed a handful of them, and I said, how many of you actually pay attention to this? Trying to get an idea of those that do consulting, those that actually maintain production networks, if they have had an issue making their security log bigger than 300 meg. I have not had one person email me back and say that they go down to 300 meg. They say, I max it out whenever possible, okay? So you do not have to go to 300 meg, but still the idea is that these logs are going to fill up. And when the log fills up, by default, it is a first in, first out. So any of the events that are older, in order to get a newer event to show up, the old event has to go away so the new event can be written to the log. So you're going to start to lose information. So before you lose that information, what do you have to do to the log? You got to back it up. Does Microsoft provide auto archiving of the security log? Okay, I'm getting a lot of no's, okay? Well, believe it or not, it does. Brand new technology, okay? Of course, they don't market this. They just kind of throw it in there and say, okay, good luck. But if I come over here to my security log in event viewer, and I go to the properties, notice now, and it has changed, it just all of a sudden changed. Archive the log when it's full, right? Do not overwrite events. But it's going to archive the log. And then now that the log is archived, it's going to allow me to take everything and archive it. And now the log is clear, archive, and now I'm going to get day time stamps of every time the log was archived, and I can actually modify where that information is stored. Okay? Here on the slide is where we go to do that, okay? So it's under a different area now, right? So event log services security, and we can say, yes, we want to back up the log automatically or not, and we can specify where the log path goes. So 20 DCs. In a single day, depending on the size of the log that you have, I could end up with 5, 10 logs per DC, per day. Depends on what activity is going on. Right? If you have one particular domain controller that through Active Directory users and computers you primarily focus on to make changes, and everyone focuses on that one domain controller, then that one DC might have 20 or 30 logs in a day, and the rest of them may only have 1. But in the end, you are going to have per day more than 1 log on average per DC. So let's say that on average there's 5, right? 5 logs are generated per day per DC. In this gentleman's environment, 20 DCs times 5 logs, that is 100 logs in one day. Each log has approximately 200,000 unique events. 100,000 100 logs times 200,000 events per log. Are we now at 20 million events per day? I think my math is correct. 20 million events in one day. Okay? Now I just have the same question for him. I just need to know the last time the domain admins group was changed. Didn't your task just get a lot bigger? Now, approximately when do you think the last time your domain admins group changed membership? 3 days ago. 30 million events he'd have to go through to find that. 30 million events. I am more than willing to do this on a per hour basis. Okay? The volume of events is getting out of control, right? But how do we even analyze the archived logs? How do we get to them? Well, Microsoft's solution to this is for you to come in here and you have to open a saved log right here. So that means that every day, in order for you to analyze all the logs that have been archived, you have to do this 5 times approximately per DC. Manually. Nothing's going to do this automatically for you. What I recommend is you create some type of specialized computer in your environment that is going to be your log analysis computer. Because you're going to have to manually come in here and the list is going to be enormous of the number of logs that you have imported into that. But because of my custom view, I can specify which logs I want to add to the custom view and which event IDs. So instead of 30 million events, I'm going to possibly get down to only, let's say, 4 million events. But I still have to manually go through each one to find out which one contains domain admins. So this is Microsoft's solution to this point, right? Which isn't bad. I mean, you guys didn't even know it auto-archived the log. It automatically archives the log, and you can tell it where to go. So you can have a single folder with all 20 DC's logs in one location. Nice, neat package. You're just going to have file after file after file that's put in there, okay? So we're getting closer to our solution, but we do have one more piece that might help us, okay? Instead of worrying about all of these archived logs, Microsoft has a new technology called event log forwarding. And event log forwarding actually is backwards compatible to Windows Server 2003. So Server 2003 DCs all the way through all the newest DCs can behave this way. What you need is you need one computer, doesn't even have to be a DC, I prefer it not to be a DC. You're going to have one server in your environment that I call the mothership. The mothership is the one that has the configuration to collect all the events from all 20 domain controllers. Okay? The way that you configure this is you're going to set up what's called a subscription. Now, in the event viewer, you have subscriptions, right? Right here. I don't know if you guys have played around with these, but subscriptions are actually quite easy. Subscription basically says, all right, I want to know which computers to gather log information from. So in your environment, this is your 20 DCs. Then it says, all right, what events, and you can put in a range of events, from which log do you want to collect? So instead of worrying about the backup, you are going to collect events from the real-time logs and put it into a single view. Now we're getting somewhere, okay? Because I don't have to manually import the archived logs anymore. I don't have to create as many custom views. Now I'm going to have a single log which contains events from all 20 domain controllers that show up under my forwarded events. One log. So I have a log management server. Now what I can do is I can create custom views. As you can see here, security events from 1001 to 2000, 2001. I have organized mine based on ranges, and I can point to one or multiple logs. I'm just going to point to the forwarded events. Absolutely a free technology from Microsoft. But still, if I have 30 million events over 3 days, and I create a custom view for group changes, I'm still going to have millions of events show up that I have no way to search except for manual. So yeah, I made some of my tasks easier, but in the end, the analysis is not there. The analysis is not available for me to go in and look at this, okay? Now, what if I want to go on holiday? I want to go to a beach somewhere, but I want to know if the domain admins group changes. Can I set up some kind of an alert using Microsoft to get an email? Believe it or not, you can. Free technology from Microsoft. All you need to do is go in, pick the event ID that you want, and attach a task to the event. The task can be send an email. Okay? You can be sitting on the beach out in Fiji, and whenever a group membership changes, you get an email. Every time a group membership changes, you get an email. So that means that every email you're going to have to go through and see if it's domain admins. So really, instead of being on holiday, you're now in email analysis mode trying to find the one, because there's no way to say just if domain admins changes. So the alerts are there, right? So in the end, what it comes down to is we have a lot of these great concepts in the new event viewer, but it doesn't give us what we need, right? The log is too small. It generates too many archives. The events are hard to decrypt, right? If I got to go in and I got to parse through all the information, it can be very difficult. I have a multitude of logs, a multitude of archived logs that I'm going to have to somehow consolidate. The consolidation tools are there, but the analysis tools aren't. The alerting is there. I can get an email, but it's not detailed enough. It's not specific to what I want, right? And I didn't even mention reporting yet because it doesn't exist, okay? If someone comes to me and asks me for a report of over the last year, not 3 days, the last year of every time the domain admins group changed membership, there's no way that you can do that, okay? But what if we had a tool that could? I mean, what if I could go to a reports tab, go down here to my reports, and go to modified admin groups. That was 3 clicks, and there's the list. I can just scan through looking for domain admins. 3 clicks. Okay? I didn't create this report. This report's canned, meaning it's already in the tool. I just click, and I'm done. Okay? So we took a task that the majority of you want to know, which is nearly impossible to perform using the normal Microsoft tools, and I made it so simple, it's 3 clicks. Okay? The problem with Microsoft's event log capabilities isn't the logging. The logging is exceptional. Every detail that you ever need is in that log. The problem is parsing the log. And parsing that log can be very, very difficult. In this gentleman's environment, for 3 days of events, we had 30 million events in 3 days. I want to know over a year. I'm not even thinking about how to do that math. We're in the billions of events. I am able to sift through billions of events within, you saw me, a second, in order to get a report, right? Because I can save this. There's an option to save PDF, CSV, however you want to save it. So a couple of clicks allows me done. Now, these are the canned reports. Now, if we just do a quick little tour of the canned reports, we have reports for logons. So today, everyone should be worried about failed logons. Every single one of us should be worried about failed logons. The number of people trying to attack our environments is tremendous, and we need to look for failed logon behavior, okay? We also need to know, all right, when anything in AD changes. Over the last 24 hours, this is everything that's changed in my Active Directory environment. Okay? You go on holiday, you go for a weekend, a quick 2-day weekend. You come back on Monday morning and it's a disaster. Nothing is working. HR can't communicate. None of the executives can get their email. Nothing is working. So what's the very first question you ask? What did you guys do, right? That's the very first question you ask. And of course, the answer is always the same. We didn't do anything. I didn't do anything. I was at lunch. I didn't do anything. It might have been Bill. I don't know. It wasn't me. Okay? You don't have to ask anymore. Just go look. It'll tell you every change that happened in Active Directory over whatever time frame that you specify. Okay? If I want to know changes that have occurred to group policy, recently created GPOs, right? I can get down to individual detail level. But these are the canned reports. What about customizing reports? Now, for years, I've worked with admins and I've worked with auditors to work with their environment. And I do thorough Active Directory audits. When I do an Active Directory audit, I can't go based on the defaults, right? You guys don't have the default installation of Active Directory. You guys have SQL, you guys have Exchange, you have SharePoint, you have VMware, you have vSphere, you have some other application. I don't know what you have. Every single one of those applications installs privileged groups. Not to mention, you've gone in and created manually groups and added them to other groups and given them privileges, and this is what you use for maintenance and management of Active Directory, correct? Of course. So you have the default groups, you have groups related to applications, and you have groups that you've created manually. Watch how easy this is to add them to this list. That first report that I did, I'll show you the report again. Modified admin groups. Notice finance managers is in here because it's a privileged group. In order to add your own custom groups, you simply come to Configuration, Group Modification, Modified Admin Groups, and you add to the list here. That's how simple it is. Now, any group that's in that list will show up in that report. If you want to separate them out, fine. It's so easy to create reports because it's all pointing to the same database. So I have the canned reports. There's over 125 of them. I can customize those reports, plus I can generate my own. Now, in the US specifically, there is a huge problem with most computers that are running applications. Because when I install the application needs a service account, and that service account performs actions on behalf of that service out on the network. The issue is that these service accounts' passwords are never reset. Is that an issue here? When was the last time that you reset your service account passwords? Many of you are checking your phone now. What's that? Weeks? When someone leaves. Someone like an employee or someone like an IT? In IT. So until that happens, you just let them go. Okay? How many people don't even do that? They just never change them. And why don't you change them? It's too difficult to know. Now, that is the correct answer, okay? That is. But if do you deal with auditors at all? Yes. Okay, so if I'm an auditor and I come to you and say, why haven't you changed this password for the service account? What's your answer to them? It's too difficult to change. Okay, you didn't give me the same answer. Okay. What's that? You don't know what it's going to break. Okay. Isn't that your job? Of course, I'm joking in a way, but it is difficult, right? Because what is our job as administrators? Uptime. If it's working now, don't touch it. Okay? And if I go and I change this one user's password, I don't know what's going to break. Okay? So this is a huge problem. But we know all of our service accounts, correct? We know them all. So wouldn't it be nice to get a report, or better yet, an email, when anything changes with those service accounts? Now, I want an email now. I want a report now. Well, watch how easy this is. User modification, service account modification. I created this one. And all I did is I went in and added my service accounts. That's it. Because you know who they are. I know you know who they are. Add them in. Now, when the auditor comes to you and say, why haven't you changed it? Well, I monitor this on a real-time basis. Notice I said real-time, and it is real-time. Watch this. I'm going to go into this SQL service right here. I'm going to go to IT. Right here is my service accounts, SQL service, and I'm going to enable this account. I'm going to go back here, and it's already there. Real time. I can set an email to it to when any of the service accounts in that list, not any user, just in that list, anything is modified, I get an email. Tell me that isn't exactly what you're looking for. Exactly what you need. Because I know reality. If this service account were to be, let's say, disabled, does that mean immediately someone's going to have a problem? Or could it not be seen for maybe a day or two, depending on the application, right? So let's say this is an application that finance uses, but they only do it at the end of the month, kind of true up, right? So it's the first day, someone calls you from finance saying, I can't get to the application. It happened 20 days ago. How long is it going to take you to discover something changed to where now they can't gain access? And exactly what that change was. I'm looking out for your behalf. When someone calls and says, I have an issue, I want you to be able to say, I'm already working on it. Because you got an email, an immediate email saying that something changed with the account. And it'll be details, okay? This is what the tool can do. And again, I can set up alerts. So these are alerts for just the dashboard, which you will always keep up. Red X's are bad, right? Plus, I can email myself. So all of these things are available. I have real-time reporting. I have custom reporting. I can create my own custom reports. I can set up alerts on those. I can see it in the dashboard. I can receive an email. And of course, any of these reports that I choose, right? Let's say service account modification, I can export it as a PDF. So no longer do I need to go in and use crazy tools to generate reports out of Active Directory. I'm just going to give the log report of what's occurred. Now, of course, I have delegation in here too, so if you don't want to generate the report, you can delegate to someone, they can generate the report. All of this is here. And what the tool, AD Audit Plus, is using is nothing more than the event logs that are being generated by Microsoft. That's it. Because the logs are good. I don't need to put in some crazy technology. I'm just going to put in a technology that can take advantage of the security logs across my domain controllers. And now that I have AD Audit in place, it allows me to do everything that's going on. Now, traditional audits are one time a year. Now, this is typically what I see in the US. I worked for companies like PwC and Deloitte, and these companies go in one time a year and they ask for specific reports. The administrator goes in and generates those reports, gives them to the auditor, and a year later they come back. So when I give these reports to the auditor, how good is that information tomorrow? Right? Is it worth anything? No, it's not, because I could change something immediately. If they come back in a year and the report from a year ago matches the report to today, does that tell them what happened in between? Absolutely not. So that type of monitoring is pretty ridiculous. So what we want to do is we want to do change monitoring, which is what AD Audit Plus does. 125 reports, completely customizable. I can generate my own. I can go in and do alerts. This is what I want to deal with, because if I go back to the yearly, that doesn't tell me what's going on in between. I have no idea what's happening here. If I do it once a month, sure, I have intermediate points, but I have no idea what's happening in between. And a lot can happen in 30 days, a lot can happen in 1 day, let alone 30 days. So what I want is true continuous reporting, and that's what AD Audit Plus does. At any one time, I can go and look at an archive of all changes that have occurred to anything in Active Directory and generate a report on it within seconds. This is what we've needed and wanted. I've been looking for this tool for a long time. I've been teaching Deloitte and PwC since 2000. So for 15 years, I've been looking for a tool like this. I have an entire array, a package of tools that I give to PwC and Deloitte that I've developed that don't even come close to a tool that takes seconds to generate these reports. So as you can see, with change monitoring, we want to know all the details in real time. And we want to be able to communicate with those changes now to get reports and be able to provide reports to those people that are interested in that information as well as ourselves. We want to take troubleshooting and reduce the time of troubleshooting to maintain our #1 goal, which is uptime. And that's where AD Audit Plus comes in, okay? So we went a little over, but we started a little bit late. So what we're going to do now is we're going to take a quick break. And after the break, we're going to talk about 2 more subjects. Lifecycle management of a user, provisioning, managing, and deprovisioning users. And we're going to talk about recovering of Active Directory changes. All right, well, we're going to get started back to make sure that we can get through as much information as possible in the time that we have. In this particular session, I want to kind of go to where we deal with users. From the beginning of the user all the way through to the end of the user, and we deprovision the user. There are many complications with something as simple as creating users and deprovisioning users. I typically joke that printers are some of the easiest things on our networks, but cause us the most problems. I mean, printer drivers, making sure this setting is correct, that setting is correct, there's right permissions. And I think that users fall into that same category. So what I want to do is I want to talk to you about the concepts that Microsoft provide for us, some of the new concepts of where Microsoft is going with user management, and then I want to come in and I want to give you solutions similar to what I just showed you with AD Audit Plus and making monitoring so much easier and powerful, and I want to do the same thing with user lifecycle management. If you do want a copy of the slides in some format, please email me. My email is right here. You can also get a card from one of the guys out here, and they can get you a copy of those, the slides as well, if you want to have those for some kind of going back and looking at stuff. So what I want to do is I really want to talk about the 3 major components with user lifecycle management, which is getting the user up and running, maintaining that user during their employment time, and then when the employee leaves, if they're fired, then I need to deprovision that user, and I need to somehow get rid of that user account or secure that user account in the environment. So, and I want to talk about it just like I did with AD Audit Plus and monitoring. I want to talk about the Microsoft way, and then I want to come in and I want to solve where Microsoft falls short in some of the management capabilities that they provide. So, you know, quickly, it's a 3-step process. Yes, there are a lot of other moving parts to it, but if we break it down into the 3 major concepts, it is the creation, the managing, and the deleting of the users. So what does Microsoft provide for the creation of users? Now, I was in MCSE and Windows NT way back when. I helped Microsoft develop about 20 Microsoft certification exams from 2000 till around 2010. So I've seen most of the interfaces that Microsoft has produced in their operating systems, and one that hasn't changed from 2000 until today is that right there, okay? It hasn't changed at all. Now, I've done some research on kind of the behind the scenes of what's going on with the creation of a user, and I think some of the details are important for us to understand, and I'm also going to leverage those details a little bit later, but I want to kind of expose you to some things that maybe you didn't know, and if you did know, then I'm just reconfirming some information. So let's kind of walk through a normal user creation in a Microsoft world. So I'm going to come down here to users, and I'm going to create a new user. So it asks me for a first name. Now, at this point, I cannot continue because the next button is not available. So I did some research on what Microsoft is doing to control this. Does anyone know the Microsoft back end of what's controlling this front end and creation of user? What in Microsoft's kind of behind the scenes is controlling this? What's that? Nope. No, but what's controlling this next button becoming available? The schema. Okay? That may seem odd, but it's the schema. Because if we were to go into the schema, which the schema is the definition of all Active Directory objects and their associated properties, it's the definition of them, it's the template per every object, we would see that every property for every type of object, in this case a user object, would have two options for configuration: optional and mandatory. So, what on this dialog box is mandatory? What's that? One character. All I know is it's configured, and it would allow me to hit next. Now, of course, when I hit next, it's going to verify whether or not the account is valid, whether it's duplicated and all that other information. But the mandatory attributes for a user, first name and logon name. If those are not configured, then you cannot create the user account. Somewhat of a trick question. Is a password mandatory for a user? What's that?
Depends on the password policy?
Absolutely not. It's not mandatory because I can hit next. Okay? Now, is a password required for your environment? Now it depends on the password policy. But the password policy is not related to the schema like I'm describing. They're two totally different things. This is where some of the confusion and the complexity of Active Directory starts. Okay? Because we don't go into the schema and manage the password and whether or not it's mandatory. It's not mandatory, it's optional. Heck, 15 years ago, actually probably 12 years ago, when we installed Active Directory, no password was required. In a Windows 2000 domain, no password was required for user accounts that were created. Okay? So I could create a user that had a blank password. That concept has not changed to today. All Microsoft did is they went into group policy and they established by default a password policy which required the user to input a password meeting certain criteria for the object to be written to the Active Directory database. Two totally different concepts, but they look like they merged together. Okay? So I put in my name. I put in my logon name. I do require a password in my environment. And there's my user. But wait a minute. I wanted to put the user in a group. I wanted to configure the telephone number and the address and the manager and all the other 20 tabs for the user. You mean that for every user that I create, I have to create the user and then do a second step and fill out all that information? It's been 15 years. And in 15 years, the technology hasn't changed at all. Now, at the base of what you do as a domain Active Directory administrator, what is one of the most basic concepts that you do on a daily basis? User creation. So out of all the activities that you do, this has to be a high percentage. And Microsoft has helped us how over 15 years? Not at all. Okay? So you may not have thought about it like this before because you know this is just the way it is. But this should not be the way it is. All right? Now, if I, in a Microsoft world, am given a list of users from human resources, and the list of users is in a nice, organized file, of course, there's an option to import a file of users using Active Directory users and computers, right? Okay, where is that? There has to be a bulk user create, right? That's been pretty much the same for how long? 15 years. Okay? Basic concepts have not been progressed. Highly complex things that no one ever uses have been developed in depth. Basic concepts, zero. Okay? So we do need to have solutions that are better for us than this, because this is unacceptable. Right? This is not acceptable when it comes to creating users. Okay? So I have a multi-step process. I have limited properties. And things are tied to the schema that I may or may not want to go into the schema and make those modifications. Once the user is created, the user object is created, that's when I come into here and I have the ability to go tab by tab and I can configure all the properties for that user account. If I have 10 users that I need to create, I have to do this 10 times. If I have 150 users, 2,000 users, I have a project, I'm opening up another location, I have something else that's going on, and I hire a bunch of employees, I'm going to have to do this manually in order to get those employees created. Okay? Or let's take a common user that we already know, right? And let's just make a template from it. Right? That way we can have a human resource employee, we can have an IT employee, we can have a help desk employee, we can have a developer, we can have a database employee, and that way, at least when I bring the user in, I simply point to the template, and the template configures their groups and configures everything else. So obviously, if I come back here to Active Directory and I create a new user, there's an option for template. Or maybe not, right? Because most organizations that I've dealt with, the procedure for getting a new user request is that the manager of the department either goes online, but typically has a paper-based form, says the user's name, their job role and functionality, and then there's an entry for similar to X user. You guys have any of that? Anyone have that? Okay? Now, So that similar to means what? What's going to happen with that similar to? That means that in here, if it's similar to Derek, I'm going to copy Derek. How good does this work for you? It's kind of nice until it doesn't work, and then it's really bad. And how do you know it's not going to work? You don't. How do you know what failed? The phone rings. Okay? This is a horrible solution, but it's what we have. This is what we have. Why is it so horrible? Well, is that manager really informed about all the groups that that user is part of? No. Does that manager have any clue what groups that user it's duplicating has access to? No. Especially if it's a new manager, right? Now, in the US, we have a very common way of picking managers. I don't know if it's the same here, but we take employees that are horrible at their job and we promote them. I don't know if that is worldwide, but that's the way we do it in the US. Okay? Okay? Which, if you never thought about it that way before, it kind of answers some things, right? It's like, wow, now I know why they're manager. So, I mean, and if we go and we look at the trends of attacks today, not number one of the top 3 trends is privilege access. Okay? This is the root of privilege access. This is the root. I'm taking a new employee and I am somehow copying all the groups that another employee has based on some manager arbitrarily saying, I think they're going to be similar to this user. They don't know. They have no idea exactly what they're doing with that decision. Now, other organizations that I've seen, what they will do is per department, like let's say education, they will create a new user and they'll call it a template user. And that way, when a new employee is hired for that department, instead of taking another user, which who knows what groups they're part of, we pick a generic template as a starting point. That way they have the minimum configurations for an employee in that department. Of course, what happens after this? Oh, you get phone calls saying, I need them added to this group, I need them added to this group, I need them added to this group, which is better than the first option for security purposes. But we do not have a mechanism from Microsoft which is template-based user creation. It does not exist, but it needs to exist. We need some way to quickly and efficiently create users. Ideally, not just create one user at a time, but import a CSV file that we get from human resources, and now the information is there, and it quickly fills out all the information based on the user, and with the template, fills in all the details. That's what we want ideally, okay? Now, if we were to look at Microsoft's website, contact a Microsoft employee, go to TechEd or Ignite or whatever it is, and talk with a Microsoft employee, they would say, we have this. Derek doesn't know what he's talking about. We have bulk user import. We've had it since Windows NT, CSVDE and LDIFT, right? How many of you have used this before? How many of you really liked it and thought it was easy? One guy thought it was easy, okay? Was it easy the first time or is it easy now? Okay. It's a little problematic at first, okay? How many of you have used PowerShell to create bulk users? How long did it take you to get to the point where it actually functioned correctly? A day maybe, okay? The rest of you, how long did it take? A while? About how long? A couple days? Okay. Okay? And were you able to add all the properties and make sure it was dynamic and variables and everything within that day? Or you just got them created to a certain point and then you have to go back in and still manually do some stuff? Does it take care of duplicated user accounts and make sure that it alters the name so it still adds the user? So instead of just using Active Directory users and computers, which is a multi-step process, now you have to use multiple tools, which is an even bigger process. Okay? So is it getting easier? Or is it really just complicated now? Because it was easy before, it just took a long time, right? Well, let me give all of you that didn't raise your hand about PowerShell a small insight. You're not going to like what I'm going to say. Being an MVP, as I said, I have the opportunity to buy my own flight up to Microsoft, and we have small little conferences multiple times a year. It was last year at this time, I was still a group policy MVP, and the way that Microsoft has structured the different disciplines of MVPs is Active Directory is over here with Windows Server. Group policy is over here with PowerShell, okay? Even though group policy is an Active Directory management tool, they don't look at it that way, okay? So when PowerShell came into existence, our new lead for our area is Jeffrey Snover. Jeffrey Snover is the gentleman who created PowerShell. He created it from the ground up. And last year, at the MVP Summit, we were told that on the Microsoft campus, every single tool must have a PowerShell command. For every single radio button, checkbox, text box, you name it, it has to have one. I don't care if you would never use PowerShell for that one checkbox, there must be a PowerShell command for that. It's a mandate across the board. So where do you think Microsoft is going with regard to PowerShell? It is everything to Microsoft. If you have not touched PowerShell, you need to. You don't have to become a guru, okay? But you have to understand somewhat of PowerShell. My best recommendation is for you to go and download and install the Active Directory module for PowerShell, because that is more in line for maybe what you're doing on a daily basis, and it's going to make more sense, and you're going to be able to leverage that more, okay? But PowerShell is the way that Microsoft is moving, right? So much so that there are things that you need to do in Active Directory, things you need to do with other tools that you can't do through a command line, that you can't do in a GUI. You have to use PowerShell. For example, how do you get the recycle bin enabled? Through PowerShell. Got to use PowerShell, okay? If you haven't touched PowerShell, I'm going to warn you. It is big, it is ugly, and it is difficult, okay? There are many tools to help you with PowerShell, but it is a beast. And it is very difficult, and you really have to be a developer in order to do the high-end things with PowerShell, right? So one of the things that I have a problem with PowerShell compared to a GUI tool is that when I go into PowerShell and I perform an action, there's no information back to me saying, this user was good, sorry, this user failed for this reason. What's that? Of course you can program that, right? I could reprogram a new operating system too, but I really don't want to do that, okay? So it is possible. With PowerShell, it's kind of like taking, way back in the day, VB. Yep, you can do everything in VB. You could redo an operating system. With PowerShell, it's similar. It is becoming even more powerful the more Microsoft puts into it, okay? But there is no GUI, right? There kind of is, but not really. Right? No confirmation of success by default. You could program it, but you'd have to do that. And there's no mechanism to identify failures. And then if you wanted to do some reporting from that, again, you'd have to program that to do any reporting. But if you were to contact Microsoft and say, what is your solution for bulk user import? They would say PowerShell. Here's an example. I pulled this directly from Microsoft. I can't make this stuff up, right? It's as if I'm looking at a totally different language. I have no idea what I'm looking at here. Sure, I understand certain things. I mean, SAM account name, and I have department and given name, and I have these things. But, I mean, look at this. This one, I have to put in a semicolon. This one, I need a dash here and a dash there. I don't need a dash there, but I need here. For me, this is more than a day. Because I'm going to get so tired of dealing with it, I'm going to go work on something else and come back to it. I'm actually going to go use a GUI and do it in about 5 minutes. That way I don't have to worry about PowerShell and getting into PowerShell. Okay? Now, for those of you that haven't used PowerShell, I'll give you a couple little tips from someone that's not very good at PowerShell, or development even. So here you can see I have the Active Directory module. Let's make this visible. Okay. Now, your best command ever as a newbie, get help. Okay? So if I want to get all the commands that Microsoft has in the AD command for PowerShell, I do get help and just type user, and boom, there they are. That's pretty cool. I will give Snover a lot of credit for putting in all of the help right in PowerShell. It's all right here, okay? Now, obviously, I can get user information, I can remove a user, I can set a user, and I can create a new user. Now, if I wanted to create a new user, right? So now that I have the command, I do get help new AD user, and it's so much information, goes off. And so it's obvious how easy this is by the list of possible attributes. It might as well be binary. Look at that. I mean, it's insane. I will say this is insane, okay? Now, I do play around with PowerShell a little bit just because I need to know it sometimes. So let's do a get help password. Now, I used to be in group policy, and passwords were like my thing. It was one of the things that I really focused on. It was really important to me. So I went into the AD module and I said, well, let me see all the new controls around passwords. Does anyone see a glaring issue with this get help command and the results? What's the rest of that? I don't know. I don't know what the rest of it is. Okay? And I can't guess, because some of these are so ridiculous, there's no way in the world you would guess them. I guarantee it. It took me an hour to find out all of them. So for these guys to say, and I don't discount them, that they were able to create a PowerShell commandlet that allowed them to do bulk user import with reporting in a day, I'm suspect. I'm a little suspect, because unless they were dealing with PowerShell for a long time before, it's not a day. It's not, I'm telling you, it's not a day. The complexity of what we're dealing with here, it's here. But how to put all the information together, extremely complex. So I'll just go back to what we were at here. And then there's descriptions and syntax, but there is one saving grace. If I now put examples, because they're all put in here, there's 3. All right? 3 examples. That's it. I don't think any of them actually import from a file. None of them do bulk user import. Okay? But there are examples. You can go out to the Microsoft website, and there is an entire section related to PowerShell. There are MVPs and others that have uploaded PowerShell commandlets you can download and consume. I have used these. They rarely work immediately in your environment. There has to be some modification to it. What modification? I don't know. Okay? But this is the direction that Microsoft is going for management of everything Windows is PowerShell. Okay? And you must learn this. There is coming a day, I don't think it'll be here in the next generation, but there is coming a day that every single GUI option is going to have a right click, show me the PowerShell script. That's coming, which I wish it would come here faster. That way I could hopefully learn PowerShell faster, because that will be very helpful. Because at this point, I have a blank slate and I have to do everything from this blank slate. And it's extremely complicated. Okay? But PowerShell is Microsoft's kind of the next thing that they're doing. So that's the creation of users. Now, what about managing 80 users? What does Microsoft provide for this? Well, if I just want to go in and manage a single user, that's actually very easy. I simply go to my user and I double click it, and right here I can manage my user. Now, what if I wanted to manage multiple users? Well, I would pick multiple users, and it's a very small subset of what I had before for an individual user. So if there's any property that doesn't fall under this GUI, you are going to have to do it manually one by one. You're going to have to use LDIFT and do an import. You're going to have to use PowerShell and hopefully put in the right syntax. Somehow, some way beyond this, you are now limited again. Okay? I did a CIO summit, which was a bunch of CIOs that went into multiple rooms. There were about 10 CIOs per room. This was late last year in Tucson, Arizona. And I had about 30 minutes to present information to this group. And I went from room to room presenting the same information over and over again. And I was talking about the fact that Microsoft hasn't enhanced their tools over the years, but instead give us technologies like PowerShell. And I had one CIO raise his hand, and he said, we had this problem. We needed to modify the email address of 100 employees. Now, the 100 employees weren't known. They just knew it was around 100 employees. There was a filter. So what they had to do is, based on their location, based on the telephone number, based on other criteria, they had to develop a query to get the list of users, and then once they had the list of users, modify their email address. Sounds easy enough, right? So they used PowerShell. And the CIO was describing that their lead administrator used PowerShell, and it took them about a day to day and a half to develop this commandlet, this script, in order to find the users. And then once the users were found, then they had to modify the email address. So the administrator hit go on the PowerShell commandlet, and it modified all the users that the filter discovered incorrectly. Took them over a week to recover. Over a week to recover. Because they actually didn't run the command to get the list of users. They ran the command which dynamically piped the users over. And so by the time it came back around, they had to find all the users that were modified. Now, let's make the whole day, the life cycle of AD. What if you were to have AD audit in place? How easy would it be to go in and find out the users that were changed in that time frame? Seconds. It took a week to recover from this, all right? So you have to have people in front of PowerShell that really know what they're doing. Because the reality is that the Microsoft tool is not going to give you the complexity that you need. The Microsoft tool is not going to give you what you need in order to manage these users. It just doesn't work that way. Bulk user modification. As we said, it is a very limited subset of the overall properties that we have for a user. If we use PowerShell, again, it's the same concept as before, extremely powerful, but somewhat difficult, and definitely doesn't give us the reporting that we need. Bulk user automation, well, I guess I could put PowerShell there, but now I have to work through creating a multi-step process with PowerShell in order to do this automated process. That could take days, if not weeks, depending on the complexity of what you're trying to find. As I said, I write blogs, and there was one, I think it was trying to discover users that were disabled and hadn't logged on for 90 days. You can actually go out to the Microsoft website, and there is a commandlet for this. It's about this long, okay? In small font, this long, right? I can do that in a couple of clicks using non-PowerShell, using the right tools, okay? So yes, we have these tools, but we want these things to be automated. I don't want to have to think. I want to be able to take advantage of some technologies in order to make my job easier. For example, I've done some work with school districts in the state of Missouri in the US. Now, there is an organization that actually provides consulting services for any school in the entire state, from kindergarten all the way through university. University of Missouri is a customer of this organization. So they have a tremendous number of clients that they have to deal with on a daily basis. Now, when we talk about K through 12, kindergarten through 12th grade or whatever grade there is a very regimented progress of employees, students in those organizations. I provision kindergartners, right? I get a list of my kindergartners. I have all their information. It would be nice to do a bulk import. Today, they can't do a bulk import, so they import these manually, okay? Now, after kindergarten, there is a progression that all kindergartners make, which would be to first grade, hopefully, right? Hopefully you can pass kindergarten, right? Hopefully, right? And wouldn't it be nice that at the end of the year, based on some day, that the system automatically took the kindergartners from the kindergartner OU and put them in the first grade OU, and they took all the kindergartner groups and erased them and put them in the correct first grader groups? And they took all of their kindergartner profiles and wiped those out and put in the first grader profiles automatically? Because if you don't do it automatically, how do you have to do it? Manually. K through 12, that's what they were doing. I mean, they tried to put in procedures, but they were just too complicated. And we don't have time to sit and just deal with this, especially in some of these smaller schools, because there's one administrator. And they don't have time to spend an entire day or 2 days or a week developing this. They need a solution that's in place. So I showed them AD Manager Plus. Revolutionized how they dealt with their students, because all they had to do was put in rules around who they were going to automatically manage through a process. Do you guys ever have projects in your organization where the project is supposed to last 6 months? How many of you after 6 months go in and take those users out of those groups the day that the project's over? None, right? Oh, they're just in there. I hope, I don't know. Well, what if the project had a high risk? What if the data was supposed to be removed, the access to the data is supposed to be removed through the group? Unless you put some type of a task in your calendar, you're not going to remember that. And if you had to do that, how many tasks would you have per day that you had to deal with that falls outside of your normal tasks? I mean, you would just have a long list and you would never get to them. We do not have the bandwidth to deal with routine user management on a daily basis. Our job is uptime. Our job is access. The majority of you, your job is not security. That's not your job. You don't get paid on security. Other people do that. And when a security person comes to you and asks you to do a task that may jeopardize uptime, what do you tell them? Oh, I can't change that service account password because something may break. That's what you tell them, okay? Because that's a security question. You're worried about uptime. If you were worried about security, you would be resetting that service account password at the same interval that all other users have to change their password. But you don't. So we need systems that help us automate bulk user management. It is going to increase security, increase overall access, and reduce our help desk calls if we can maintain users in a much better way. What about deprovisioning users? Well, this is actually pretty easy. Right? Right click, delete. Gone. That's easy. Right? What if I wanted to wipe out these 5 users? Click, shift, click, right click, delete, gone. That's easy, right? So the destruction, very easy. The creation, not so easy, okay? But what if we wanted to have some mechanism that every morning at 3 o'clock in the morning, we went in and evaluated every user to determine if they meet certain criteria. They haven't logged on in 90 days. They have an account that's disabled or locked out or whatever it is. And all based on all this criteria, we quarantine the user. So every day we know that users that are not active, things are happening to those accounts so that we are protecting from them VPNing in and gaining access to something even though they no longer work for the company. That they didn't share their credentials, right? But I'm sure that doesn't happen here, right? No one would ever give up their username and password to another employee. They wouldn't have to, right? Because it's on a sticky on their monitor. Do you guys have that problem? Or is it just, you know, America? I don't know. It's a worldwide phenomenon. It's everyone does the same thing because it's just a computer. We're all humans dealing with a computer, and in order to deal with that computer, we have the same behaviors, okay? So the deletion is there, but we don't have any automation. I mean, there's no automation here. Could I use PowerShell? Yes, I can. Is it difficult? Yes. Is there some reporting? You got to build it in. I don't want to have to go and do all that when I can do a couple of clicks and have the system doing it for me. So this idea that I am having to create something from scratch really doesn't appeal to me, okay? So let's now talk about how a tool like AD Manager Plus fits into the piece, okay? Vivin at the very first today, he said something that I want to reiterate because I think it's important for you because it's one of the reasons that I align myself with this organization. I like simple solutions that do complex tasks, okay? I play racquetball. Many of you probably don't even know what racquetball is. It's a form of squash, but with a different ball. And I play racquetball back home with a gentleman that works for another company, I won't say the name, and they have a very complex user management tool. So complex that it's almost impossible to get even reports out of this tool. I know because I've helped auditors try to get reports, and it's almost impossible to get reports out of these tools. And so he and I constantly have conversations just like we're having this conversation here, which is ease of use. Now, when you get a tool and you install the tool, right? Let's say you download a tool. What is the first thing that you want out of that tool once you have it installed? Because are you going to read the manual? No. Right? What do you want out of that tool? Ease of use. I want it to be obvious. Now, I could give this tool to my 80-year-old grandmother and ask her to create a user. And I guarantee she can do it in less than 5 minutes. Okay? Where would I go to create users? AD management. Duh, right? Where would I go to create a user? Create single user. Well, that was easy enough. Okay, now notice, do I have to do the mandatory schema properties first in order to fill out the rest, or do I get to do everything in one shot? It's all here. It's all right here. Why Microsoft hasn't done this, I have no clue. Oh, by the way, do you know what I had to, the application I had to install in order to get all my users to do this? Just on one machine because it's HTML based. Any user from around the world. I could be on the beach, right? I have it right here, wherever my phone is. I have it on my phone. Android phone, boom. I go to my Android phone and I can connect to this. It's just HTML, okay? So you don't have to keep reinstalling. How many of you have applications that has a client in that every time there is a new release, you have to install the application on every client that hasn't installed? It's a royal pain. You don't have to do that here. Again, these are benefits of having a tool like this. The simplicity is fantastic, right? So if I come in here and I put in a first name, you mean it has intelligence to actually fill out the other information so I don't have to retype it? Because how many times do you type it and you mistype it? Right? You fat finger stuff all the time. You hit enter, it's like, oh man, so now it's just causing time. Is it absolutely disastrous? No. But wouldn't it be nice if a tool does this for you? Right? I want to be able to go in and I want to be able to have password information. I want to be able to have everything right here so that when these users are created, it's very simple. Okay? Now, it would also be nice if I could do a bulk user import. Now, I asked Grandma to do a bulk user import. You think Grandma can find bulk user import? I hope so, because it's the next one on the list. All right? So, create bulk users. Oh, import, that's easy. Oh, choose the file. Okay. Well, there's the file. I got that from Human Resources. Oh, you mean it's going to give me a summary? It's going to tell me what it's going to do before it does it? Does PowerShell do that? It can. Does PowerShell do it by default? No. Is that part of your day to create the summary before creation? Or is that another day? Because that would be tough, wouldn't it? Yeah, but it can do it. I absolutely agree it can do it. I guarantee Don Jones can probably do it in probably 20 minutes, maybe 15. But Don Jones probably knows PowerShell as good as Jeffrey Snover knows PowerShell. All right? This is powerful. Right? To be able to have this information to say, yes, I typed in everything, it's giving me summaries before I actually create them. Okay? Now, before we were also talking about templates. So if I go back to AD management and I ask Grandma to find templates, user creation and user modification templates. So user creation templates are here. And I can pick and choose. Let's just go to the default template first. And you will see that in here is where I define all of my rules and requirements for the user, okay? So notice I have more options here for passwords in the template, but I'm only giving the end result so it's easier and more seamless to create that account. If I come back in here, you know, I have tons of options here. I have drop down on what I'm going to make for the name. So all of this is a template. It's automating the process for me.
Can you get to the extension attribute?
Yeah. Okay. Now, how many of you love to create users because you have managers that call or managers that give you stuff, and if it's not done quick enough, they call you again and say, is it done? Is it done? Is it done? Is it done? Anyone have that? But you love it. You like it. Okay? Or you always, and you're sitting there working away and someone's at your door, you're like, oh. Why not give them the ability to do it? They can't spell. Great. Wonderful. Hey, I got a solution for that. Okay. Now, first of all, what I want to do is I want to talk about the reality. If I ask a manager to fill out all of this, come on, right? You have no idea how to do all that. But what if I could create a template that was nearly idiot-proof? You know what I mean by idiot-proof? Does that translate? Right? An idiot can do it, right? So what I'm going to do is I am going to create a new template. And I'm going to enable drag and drop. Now what drag and drop allows me to do is if we don't care about the office, we get rid of it. If we don't care about the web page, we get rid of it. If we don't care about this entire tab, we get rid of it. Okay? This is a template. I am creating a template so that someone can create a user from just what I'm giving them as a result. Oh, you needed Office back? Just drag and drop it back where you want. Okay? Completely, you are customizing this template. Now, sometimes there are properties in here that if fat-fingered, because they don't know how to type, if they're misconfigured, we have applications that are relying on those properties, and if that property is wrong, the application is going to fail. So we might want to go in, and let's say for description, we want to put in HR and make it read-only. So they see what the description is, but they can't modify it because they shouldn't. And it always has to be correct. But they need to somehow have that information available to them so they can see it and then relay that information to someone else. Okay? So what we are doing in the template is we are predetermining configurations, but not allowing that other person to modify them. Okay? I can also go in and I can make some properties mandatory. Similar to what the schema is doing, but I'm doing it here so that these properties must be filled. You cannot create the user unless you fill this out. So I am defining, I am describing my own environment before that person ever touches this template to ensure that everything for that user is correct once that user is placed in Active Directory. Now, there might be even other configurations, such as group membership, which you're going to come in and maybe you add them to the HR group. But you don't even want them to see it. You know what? It's none of their business. You don't, because now what you're doing is giving away security information. So now what you do is you come in here and you make this silently active. The setting is there, it's in the template, but when they get the template view, that setting won't show up for them. But it's going to configure for that end user. These are things that we can do inside of these templates. Now, these guys are going to show you this afternoon, but I'm going to steal a little of their thunder because I'm going to show you the power of this in the end result. But I'm going to take a couple of steps to do it. If we were to ask a manager to create users without this tool, what tool do you give the manager from Microsoft to create users? What tool do you give a manager that's been delegated the ability to create users to create users? Of course, Derek, that's a simple question. ADUC. So if I'm over here and I'm logged in as the HR manager, and you go and you tell me to use Active Directory users and computers, now, I have just been delegated the capability over HR. But what else do I see? Everything. Okay? Now, we're all human, and when we get something like this and it's lunchtime and we're bored, what are we going to do? We're going to look. Ooh, I wonder what this is. I wonder what this is, right? So watch this. Under IT, there is a user, You know what? I asked Adam a question last week, and he giggled at me and he made fun of me that I didn't know what I was doing. I guess it's time to get payback. Ah, dang. Now, wait a minute. You're telling me that this tool doesn't strip away what they don't have? They give them everything and the ability to try it? You're going to force this poor manager to do trial and error to try to find where to go and what to do? You're just not going to do it. Now, does Microsoft have a solution to get around this problem? Yes, they do. It's been around for 15 years. It's called a task pad view. That term, has anyone even heard that term before? One guy. Have you ever created one? Do you still create them? These are horrible. I'm not even going to show you. They're that bad. They're ridiculous, okay? That is Microsoft's solution to that, all right? Watch my solution. I don't have anything installed here. I have nothing installed except for a browser. I log on as my account. And do I have all my tabs? No. What tabs do I get? The ones that I've been delegated to control. That's it. I don't have the abyss. I only have what I can do. Did I have to sit down and develop this? No, it is dynamic. No matter what I do in the delegation of the AD Manager Plus tool, the user only sees what they're delegated. That is power. I don't have to do anything. If I want to add that this user can do one more thing, I simply go back to the delegation, boom, shows up immediately. No more customization, no more installation of new updates. It just works. So now what we're doing is we are taking the ability, So bulk users here, they don't even have to type. All they do is they point to the CSV file, the bulk user import, the template's already associated with them, done. And so right here, if I did create a single user, come on. Notice my tabs are gone. I told them to use that template, which I have already narrowed down. They don't have the abyss. And if they were to use that bulk user import, it would use this template and bring it in, fill it out, they would verify, okay, done. You are not controlling user creation details. You are just doing what you're told. If you're just doing what you're told, why not let the user that's telling you what to do it themselves? It's happening anyway. You're just being told what to do. You're just having to stop your day and go create users based on what people are telling you, and then you go on with your day doing things that are actually extremely important. They can do this. With the right tool in place, it's extremely easy to set this up, okay? Now, I have slides that kind of go over all this. I do want to show you a couple more things.
What check does do for unique some account's name?
It's in the template. So here for account, where is my, nope.
You're giving the use there for it.
Right. Create your own norming formats, and in there, it handles, no, wait, it's under here. Oops, come on. So, check for duplicates, and I can control how the duplicate is managed. So I can append, I can not create, allowing you the flexibility for not to fail, but in the report, because it always gives you a report of what was created, it'll tell you what it created. That way you're not failing, you're getting that report. Okay. Now, normally from HR, you're not getting a nice, neat list of users from one department. It's a multiple departments, right? Well, if I have multiple templates, I don't want to have to take the time of parsing the CSV file myself, but what I can do is I can actually import users that use different templates. So this is a finance user, this is an engineering user, this is a finance user, and they're all in the same CSV file. And all I did is I pointed to the template in the file. So all these details have been considered, making your job much easier in the management of users, provisioning and management of users, okay? Now what about the deprovisioning of users, which can be very difficult? Well, I can have automation policies. And in my automation policies, I can define what I'm going to do with users in a multi-step process. So I can go in, I can move the user, I can disable the user, and after so much time, I can delete the user. And these are controlled by the automation settings here of how often you're going to do those things. So daily at whatever time. So I can now tie scheduled things with other events that are occurring to quickly look through the behavior of an account to deprovision. So I don't have to do it.
Can it go out and do something on the server? Like delete a home drive or something?
This particular piece can't, but there are tools within the suite that can. And actually ask those gurus, and they know all that stuff. Okay? So really what we're doing now is we're creating a centralized environment that I hope you see how simple it is to get around in here. I mean, there are quite a few tabs, but the simplicity is so simple and how it's designed. So now we have the ability to provision users, we have the ability to use templates, bulk user creation, and in that bulk user creation, we can do multiple templates. We have the ability to manage single users, bulk users. We can automate those users. I was telling you about the school department. We can automate the deprovisioning of users and define exactly what is going to happen with those users based on their current state of that, whatever the time that runs. So now we can actually go do things that we need to do, and we let the tool do the automation pieces that we know have to do on a daily basis. And the ability to have the tool, especially when you do a bulk import manually, tell you what's going to happen and what happened, invaluable. Absolutely invaluable. Okay? So this is that concept of creating users, managing users, and then dealing with users to make sure that they are securely locked down when they leave the organization or when they separate from the company. Okay? Now, this is a tool, all of that was a tool related to AD Manager Plus. And AD Manager Plus is a pretty large tool in what it can do. But again, the simplicity of the install and the simplicity of how the tool works is quite easy. Okay? So the first tool we looked at was AD Audit Plus, and that allows us to do monitoring. Then we looked at the tool, which is AD Manager Plus, allowing us to manage. Unfortunately, there are going to be times when you have issues come up in Active Directory that you have to recover from. Microsoft has made some changes on how they deal with recovering from issues in Active Directory. If we go way back in time to the early Windows 2000 days, it was not friendly, okay? I mean, the Microsoft recovery tools were horrible and very difficult to manage. They certainly weren't GUI-based, and you had to do certain steps in the exact right order in order to get things to be recovered in some way. Even doing Active Directory cleanup could be very difficult. Where now what they're doing is they're trying to make some of the tools a little bit easier to use and make them more GUI-based, okay? So let's talk about what Active Directory recovery is. We'll go over the Microsoft options. And then I want to talk about ideal scenarios. Microsoft likes to market, and it's kind of like a sleight of hand comedian or a magician, where they're doing over here and they're stealing your wallet over here and you didn't even notice because you're watching this hand. That's kind of what Microsoft does. They're like, oh, look at this recycle bin. This is fantastic. Wow. Nope, doesn't do that. But look at the recycle bin. It's fantastic. It's just like you've had on your desktop forever. Does it do that? No. But look at the recycle bin, right? So you're constantly looking over here, hearing what they're saying, and you're agreeing, but you're not even thinking about what it doesn't do. So I'm going to try to expose some of those things because they are quite important. So what is Active Directory recovery? Well, first of all, we have to consider Active Directory is complex. Okay? Highly complex. If we just look at group policy, I think group policy is one of the most complex aspects of Active Directory. The creation of one group policy object creates a multitude of files and objects within the system that are all tied together. Once we edit that group policy object, now we create additional files. I mean, I could spend probably 2 hours solely talking about ADM templates and ADMX files and how those things are managed from an old Active Directory environment to a new Active Directory environment because of the complexity of what Microsoft put into the system. So some of the aspects of Active Directory, including group policy, are very complicated, and we want to make this somewhat simpler, okay? Objects can be deleted easily. Right? I went in and to Active Directory, right-click, delete. It's that simple, okay? Now, Microsoft has put in some help for us, right? So if I create a new organizational unit, and I call it the new OU, and I try to delete this, whoa, yeah, you accidentally tried to do something. Are you sure you wanted to do that? Okay. Notice there is no option for go ahead and delete. Okay? It's an option that says, sorry, you have insufficient privileges to do this. I am logged on as an enterprise admin. What do you mean I have insufficient privileges? I am the admin. No one tells me what I can't do, right? That's a lot of mentality that we have. But they have this in here, right? Sometimes they delete on purpose, and sometimes they do it in error, right? We have accidental objects can be modified easy, right? So if I come in here, you know, let's say that I am looking at a user property. So I come in here, and I'm kind of poking around. Oh, what was that before? I have cancel, but if I didn't know I typed something and I hit apply, right? You kind of start getting a little hot, you kind of sweat, and you're like, I hope nothing happens from that. Oops, right? Because I don't know what it was before, and I really didn't mean to type it in, but now it's in there for good, right? So I can easily modify something on accident, or if someone has the right credentials, they could go in and modify something on purpose. Remember our HR manager? How much trouble do you think would occur if a disgruntled HR manager has too many privileges in Active Directory, like resetting the password for Adam? April Fool's Day is just around the corner, right? So these are things that we have to be concerned about. And we have to have the tools in place to help us recover from. So it's not only the deletions, the recycle bin recovers from deletions, right? Does it recover from modifications? The recycle bin recovers from deletions, I said. How about modifications? The recycle bin is fantastic. It recovers from any deletion. Does the recycle bin help with modifications? No, not at all, okay? So we have to consider both aspects, all right? When we recover, I don't want a subset of properties to be restored. I want all the properties to be restored, okay? I don't want to have to restore the computer account and then go and join it back to the domain. I want all those things there. I don't want to restore a user account and all the groups are wiped out. That does not help me. That actually hurts me. That makes it more complicated than if I had to recreate the darn thing from scratch. So I want to make sure everything is there, right? Restoration from modified objects can be all-inclusive, but also allow me for granular control. Let's say I go into a user and I modify 5 properties. But one of them I modify incorrectly, on accident. But I don't notice it until a week later. I don't want to have to go back and put all 5 properties back and then reconfigure them again. I just want this one to be back that I can reconfigure it. Or maybe it shouldn't have been configured at all. So I need the granular control from modified events so that I can pick and choose exactly what I want to put in place. But I don't want just the last modification, because what if someone else modified it and then someone else modified it? Don't you want a history of modifications so that you can go back at any time? Of course you do. You need the flexibility to restore modifications even a year ago, because the problem may not have surfaced until now, but the change occurred a long time ago. You need to be able to go back in time to recover from an errant modification. Okay, so what are the Microsoft ways of doing this? Who are my NTDS util recovery people who have had to do this in production? How fun was it? Did you enjoy it? Or was it kind of like me taking pliers and pulling out your toenails, right? Painful. Painful process. What does NTDS util utilize is the backup information. How did I get the information backed up so that NTDS util can work? What did I have to back up? The system state. Okay? If I didn't back up the system state, NTDS util is not worth anything. All right? What is included in the system state? Well, it's the entire Active Directory database. It's not a diff. It's the entire Active Directory database. DNS. Certificate information if you have a certificate server. And the sysvol. It's all in there. Okay? So typically, organizations create a system state one time a day. And with NTDS util, I can go in and I can, from the abyss of information, I can pick one object or one property of an object and put it back. How easy is that to pick the one object? Not very easy at all. Okay? It's not easy at all. In order to get to NTDS util, we have to take one of your 20 domain controllers and boot it to Directory Services Restore mode. But of course, that's going to be easy because when you installed Active Directory and it asks you for the administrative Directory Services Restore mode password, you know exactly where to get that, correct? Because maybe you didn't even install Active Directory. And so you try to type in the password that you use for everything else and it doesn't work. Right? This is the time we need to be quick, right? We're not in here to lollygag. We're not in here to take our time. We're in here to do a job, get it done, and get out. So I don't want to have to go find the Directory Services Restore Mode administrator password. I need to know exactly where that is. I need to know what it is. Because this is a disaster we're recovering from. I need to be able to get in and get out. Okay? Now, this NTDS util, I want to focus back on group policy. So imagine you go into the default domain policy and you add a new setting to the default domain policy, which goes out to every computer in the domain, and you need to recover from that. Is that information in NTDS util? Yeah. But let's say that you have 100 GPOs, so that means you have 100 GUIDs, and in the 100 GUIDs, you have to know exactly which GUID is related to the GPO, which you modified. Do you know that? I hope so. Because now you're going to have to find that GUID under the sysvol, and you're going to have to restore that GUID and the settings back from there. And if you make an Active Directory modification or deletion, you're going to have to go into Active Directory and do the same type of concept, knowing exactly where that object resided. If it was a deleted object, you can't go search in the current Active Directory. That's not possible, because it doesn't exist. So you have to know the exact LDAP path of where to go to pull that object out of the backed up data. All right? So the complexity is here, and you're going to have to know where to go to get that. Another thing with NTDS util, when I take one domain controller and reboot it to Directory Services Restore mode, what it's doing at that point is not initiating the Active Directory services. It's going to a local SAM, which is where the Directory Services Restore mode administrator account resides. Now I can modify the database because it's not being used. Let's say that I have deleted a user and I need to restore that user. So I go into NTDS util, I find the account, I restore the account, Now the account is in this Active Directory database, but not the rest of them. If I simply take this server, reboot it to Active Directory, what is going to happen with the user that I restored here as soon as it communicates with one of the other DCs? It's going to be deleted. That was a lot of effort for bad result, right? So what do I have to do in order to get that account to be enabled and replicate out? I have to make it authoritative. I have to make it an authoritative restore. Okay? So these are things that the tool kind of had negatives with. Now, Microsoft realized that it was too easy to delete things, right? So as I was showing you here with this new OU, an OU that I've just created, I can't go in and delete it because it's protected. So Microsoft added basically a permission here, which says protect from accidental deletion. It's also on the access control list. You can go to either place to remove that. This is the only way to delete it. Because if I don't get rid of this or get rid of the permission's in place, not allowing me to remove it. Okay? So it's not an OK or cancel. It's I got to go in and make a configuration in order to do that. So this was Microsoft's attempt to kind of help administrators from accidental deletions. They also, there's all the details of the permissions, created something called reanimate tombstone. Now, when an object is deleted, or back in the day was deleted, it actually wasn't deleted. It was kind of, all the properties were stripped away and the object was maintained for a certain period of time. And it was a tombstone time to live. This tombstone time to live is really what Microsoft took advantage of in order to bring the object back. Okay? So the object wasn't physically deleted, it was just kind of put in this other state, but all the properties were stripped away. Okay? The distinguished name was kind of chewed up and mangled a little bit. The non-link and link values, such as group membership, were removed. So it didn't have all this additional information. And then once I actually put it back into time, then it didn't have that information. And I have to resurrect that information manually. So somehow I would have to guess, or I had documentation, or somehow, some way I had to put that information back. Now this reanimation tombstone was only available for 180 days. So if we look graphically at what happened, when I delete a user, it goes into this tombstone state, which is really not worth anything. And then after 180 days, the garbage collection service would go and take those accounts and purge them completely. So now you couldn't even bring them back from any point. Okay? Obviously, this didn't work very well, because if I don't have group membership for a user, it doesn't really help me. If I don't have other properties for a user, it doesn't help me much. So the latest and greatest is we have the recycle bin. Microsoft is so confident of this technology that by default, it's not enabled. Okay? That should be indication number one. It's not enabled. All DCs must be server 2008 R2. Oh, that's kind of interesting. Well, what if I don't have all server 2008 R2 DCs, but I want to use the technology? Can I? No. So if I want to use the technology, what is Microsoft forcing me to do in order to use a technology? Upgrade, which means what? Okay. I have been around the world, and I constantly get crazy questions about Microsoft. Crazy questions. And almost every question, one answer will answer the question. Why does Microsoft do this? Why does Microsoft do this? For money, always works. Why did Microsoft not make the recycle bin backwards compatible? Because they wanted you to buy new licenses to get the technology. It works for almost everything, okay? I think I proved earlier, Microsoft is not in business to make your life easier. That's not their job. Microsoft's job is to sell product, and they want you to buy, okay? If their job was to make your life easier, you would have templates. You would have easier ways to create users. You would have automated policies in order to provision and deprovision users. You would have monitoring and the ability to search and report on that monitoring. That does not exist without spending money. And in some cases, you can't even do it. All right? So this is because of that. Must be Server 2000 R2 functional level. This is the same as that, money. If you think you're smarter than Microsoft and you have 2 Windows Server 2003 domain controllers and the rest are Server 2008 R2 domain controllers, you will not have the ability to do the recycle bin until you go in and say that functional level. As soon as you say that functional level, what happens to the 2 2003 domain controllers? They start to drift away. They do no longer replicate to the domain controllers. They will just start, they'll still authenticate, but they won't get any updates now. Okay? They are forcing you to upgrade to get the technology. And once it's enabled, you're there. You cannot get rid of the recycle bin, I guess, unless you reinstall the entire domain. Okay? So the recycle bin is the new way. Users are stored in the correct groups. Well, that's a benefit. Once the object is deleted with the recycle bin enabled, objects become logically deleted. Okay, so everything's still there. It's kind of like taking the user and put it into a quarantined OU. It's over there. It's kind of sealed off and locked down. Nothing really changed. The user's still there. It's just over there. Okay? After the deleted object lifetime expires, so over there is a time in which it becomes no good anymore, okay? And then I'm going to do something else with it. So at that time, it becomes recycled, and it is a recycled object, and most of the attributes are stripped away. This is kind of like the tombstone that we talked about before. So all we're doing is we're putting in the last technology an intermediate step, which is going to keep the object intact for a certain period of time. And it looks like this. Users are deleted, everything is still there, they're recycled, we lose properties, and then it goes to garbage collection and goes out. Each of these is about 180 days. So a year it takes for the garbage collection to get rid of an account. That's the default. This is the Microsoft way of allowing you to recover, okay? In order to enable the recycle bin, PowerShell, okay? Microsoft's solution for you to recover, PowerShell. You can also use LDP, but PowerShell is Microsoft's solution. Of course, you can go and buy a tool to sit on top, and now it's graphically there, but the Microsoft way is to use PowerShell. Okay? None of that is ideal. If I am having to recover an account and you're going to force me to somehow get the right syntax in PowerShell, okay, I'll try. You know, I've never done it before. Hopefully you're not using PowerShell all the time to recover objects. It's not like you used it yesterday. If you're using it every day, you have a problem in your environment with someone deleting objects. And you may want to fix that first and then come back around. So what is our ideal scenario? We need to be efficient and fast. Quick, easy, I want to see, done. Okay? I'd really like to see what I'm doing. I want to see it. I don't want to have to type a command to see it. I just want to see it. I want to be able to go to a graphical interface and just see what's there so that it's easy for me to understand. Okay? Recovery needs to include deleted and changed AD objects. recycle bin does not recover from modified objects. Right? I mean, how long have you guys been using Windows? A long time, right? You guys have a recycle bin on your desktop. If you go into your Word document and you delete a paragraph and you save the file, can you go to the recycle bin and recover that paragraph? No. Microsoft put a technology in place to help us with that, right? Is it related to the recycle bin? No, it's called previous versions. It's a totally separate technology. The same thing here, the recycle bin does not recover from modified changes. What occurs more in your environment? Accidental deletions or accidental modifications? Modifications. Again, does Microsoft want to help you? I don't think so. They want to help themselves, right? Recycle bin for AD, that has market clout. That sounds cool. Wow, it recovers from deletions. Does it do this? It recovers from deletions. Again, they're marketing one thing, but you're missing the key points of what it doesn't do, okay? So where does Recovery Manager Plus come in? Well, this is a newer tool, okay, to the suite of the AD solutions. I have categorized this tool to really do 4 main things for administrators, okay? Of course, it does a variety of other things, but the 4 main things is what we're going to focus on, okay? The way that the tool works is going to work really on a baseline. We have to have some knowledge of what we have in order to look at changes, in order to look at deletions, okay? So what we're going to do is we're going to rely on backups. Now, when I do a system state backup, it's everything. When I do a Recovery Manager Plus backup, it's just a diff. It's whatever changed. I don't need to do the entire object because I don't want to recover the entire object if it's been modified. I just want the changes. So what we're dealing with are very small bits of data compared to system state, which is huge, okay? Also, if we go with on a baseline, we're going to eliminate some of the false positives that we get in some of the other tools, okay? Scheduled backups. I don't want to have to go in and do this every day. I want it to do it automatically for me, okay? And reporting is built in, and I'm going to be able to track the history of these things. Now, the very first thing that I think it helps from is global. I'm going to call this a global issue, right? I delete an OU and all of its contents. Okay, how problematic is that? Hopefully none of you have experienced this. You may have heard about it, but this is something that if someone sets something up wrong, it can be very easy to do. So let's say, for example, that I'm over here. Here is Recovery Manager Plus. This is the interface for Recovery Manager Plus. Backups are real easy to create. You can see all the backups. You can see the time that they took. You can see exactly what's going on. It's been occurring as I go through. But let's say, for example, that over an Active Directory, you're told, you know what, Project 2, completely done. We're done with Project 2. Okay, so I can delete Project 2. You ask, confirm, wonderful. So you go to Project 2, and you delete it. Huh, oops, I deleted Project 3. I didn't mean to do that. There's an undo, right? Active Directory user computers has a right-click undo. That would be a cool feature. That would actually be pretty cool. But that feature does not exist. All right? Now, over here, I can actually go in and specify down at the OU level just what I want to restore. And it's going to give me verification, and it's going to say, all right, Project 3, and okay, there was a user and there was a group in that OU, those of course were deleted, but I'm going to allow you to roll back. Tells you it rolled it back. So now, hopefully, to keep my job, whew, thank goodness, right? And so memberships are there, everything's there, fantastic, all right? So in order for you to recover from a global disaster, it's pretty easy to roll that back, okay? And it's going to keep track of all this information so that at any point you can recover from that. Now, there may be other instances where it's not as global, but just as problematic. Let's say, for example, that you have users that have configurations, right? Members that they're part of, and accidentally that user is deleted. Okay. Now, the way that the tool can also work is it coincides with the recycle bin. So I have this recycle bin concept, and I can pick my user, because it's now here in this recycle bin concept. So it's kind of like, you know, you have, I travel a lot, so I have a lot of receipts, right? So let's say I don't need that receipt, and I throw it in the trash. Oops, I need that. So I can go out of the trash and then, you know, kind of get rid of all the wadded up part of the receipt, and boom, I'm going to restore this object in completeness. All of its properties, everything is going to be restored such that now when I go back, Patsy's here, all the members are there. Whew, fantastic, okay? So we have more global, which is pretty complex, because now I'm having to keep all of the link attributes in place. Groups, their memberships, users, their properties, the groups that the user was part of that maybe weren't deleted, all those things have to be restored, and that can be done with a single-click recovery. I can also do it based on users, and again, the users and all their properties come back. So that kind of makes sense with regard to the idea of deletions, okay? But what about modifications? Well, I have group 1, and group 1 has 3 members, right? And what if someone comes in here and they remove this user and they add in 2 more users? For whatever reason, who knows why they do? Why do people do anything, right? It was just an error. They put it in wrong. They typed in the wrong information. I have no idea why they put that in and why they removed that. But this can actually be a huge problem trying to recover. Now, the recycle bin will not help me here. And actually, I don't even remember what the group membership was, and I don't remember how to put it back, because this was a modification. The group's still intact. So the tool allows me, but I know it was group 1, right? So I can go to group 1, and it gives me a history, right? Now, the first thing that I want to show you is all of these are when the group changed over time. Now, I don't know when it changed. I don't know how many times it's changed. All I know is at this particular date, this particular group membership, it was correct. So I can go into any particular point, and it will tell me the backup value and the current value. The current value is what I have in place that's not good. The backup value is what I'd want to get to. So I can go through each of these looking for when it was correct. 1, 3, 5. Oof, okay, fantastic. So 1, 3, 5 is this one. I restore. Yes. Oh, I need to keep my job. Please get me back to where I know is good. All right, so I come back over here. Whew, saved. Okay? So I have global. I have individual. And then I have modifications. But what I just showed you was at that backup time, I wanted to restore back to everything. Well, what if there were 5, 6, 7 modifications, not just in groups, but across the board, and you want to be able to go back at any time with any property to restore? Well, let's see. I have a user here, Mark. And Mark has had some changes over time. You can see here that Mark's had some group membership changes, some phone, manager, whatnot, and all I know is the current phone is wrong, but this one's correct. Great. I don't have to worry about the global change. I come in here, hit that, restore, and voila, that property is now restored for that user. Okay? There's the old, there's the new, everything's wonderful, so now I'm back. So it doesn't have to be global, because if it's global, now you have a huge issue. And that issue is you have to worry about the properties that have been modified and the properties that haven't been modified. So I think that this piece here, the granular piece, is one of the most powerful and unique aspects of Recovery Manager Plus.
And in Audit Plus, you'd be able to see that history of changes.
Oh, sure. Yep. So the question was, in AD Audit Plus, would you see the history of changes? The answer is yes, because it's an AD change. Because both tools are looking at AD, and since AD is being modified, that's where they're checking. Okay? So what we've looked at throughout the day is what I consider to be Active Directory lifecycle management. It's not just individual user. Our jobs are highly complex. We're not the only ones in our company doing our jobs. So we want to be able to make things more efficient. That's where the creation, management, and deprovisioning of users comes in, so that we can create templates that are easy. We can delegate, and it automatically gives them what they need. That's easy. For users to be deprovisioned, I want that to be automated. No matter what changes in Active Directory, I need to know about it. And I am not willing to search through 30 million events to find it. I just want to hit some buttons and the report be there. That's how simple I want this to be. And it's not just for the last day or two. I want it to be for an extended period of time. Also, if a key control, group, user, OU changes, I want to be notified through email. And I want it to be very detailed. I don't want it to be some group change and I have to determine if it's the one I wanted. I want it to be very explicit. And in AD Audit Plus, those types of alerts are associated with the reports. That's why I'm telling you, I showed you how to create a custom report so you could be very granular in what you want to receive information about. Super duper simple to set these up. At the break, I was talking to someone about the Microsoft solution for this. Microsoft has SCOM, right? Woof. I mean, you need to have a PhD in rocket science to figure that stuff out. This is not. This is super simple. I mean, I can get around in the environment so easy, okay? Finally, bad things are going to happen. And we need to have different levels of recovery. Global down to very, very granular and detailed. So Recovery Manager Plus allows that variety of different recoveries so that you can do everything related to an OU and its objects, or be very detailed. I just want to restore the phone number. I just want to restore a group membership. I just want to do something related to an object, and I have a history of those so I can pick and choose whichever one that I want. So that's kind of what we went over today. A lot of information, in my opinion, in a very short period of time. We are now going to take lunch, and lunch is going to be about an hour. The rest of the afternoon, you're actually going to be able to go through some of the AD solution tools in very detail with the guys that checked you in. And these guys are rocket science when it comes to these tools. So I encourage you to be very interactive with them. Ask them questions. They're going to be able to show you how the tools work inside and out. And you're going to have issues that you're fighting with right now back at the office. That's the reason they're here, is to help you understand that these tools can solve those things. And they're going to be able to show you up here how you can solve that back in your office. So that's the way the rest of the afternoon is going to be, but we're going to take about an hour for lunch now. If you have any questions, I'll be kind of milling around. I do have to jump on an airplane, and I think it's about an hour flight to Copenhagen, right? I'm hoping, but I have to fly to Copenhagen today, so I will be milling around for a little bit, and then I'm going to head out. But these guys, you are in amazing hands with these guys. So I appreciate your time, and if you do have any questions, you have my email, and thank you very much. I appreciate it.